This week, I'm going to chat with a photographer whose career has had him interacting with presidents, world leaders, rock stars, all kinds of celebrities, in addition to the occasional average person. My conversation is with magazine photographer and photojournalist Rick Friedman. Stay tuned.
You're watching TOGCHAT Live, the only live show dedicated to the hows and whys behind creating consistently great photographs. Here's your host, Joe Edelman.
Hey, gang, welcome to episode number 232 of TOGCHAT. I do hope that you're all healthy and, of course, wearing your masks, practicing your social distancing. You know the drill. Check in, leave a comment, let me know you're here and where you are in the world. We've got Robert Julian from Mexico here. Gabe is here from down in Miami. I've got Patrick in Paris, France. Ryan in Atlanta. Lynn from New York. And Rick is here. So if you guys have questions for him, you can ask him in the chat. And let's see, we got Milton in San Diego, Mitch in Northern Ireland. Mitch, it's about time you joined my Facebook group. It's great to have you there. Let's see, FN89 up in Ottawa, Nick in Brooklyn. Thank you, all of you, so much for being here. You are part of a global community of photographers in over 100 countries who tune in to watch or listen to TOGCHAT every week. And for that community, I'm going to work really hard to help you with your photography in the next 60 minutes. It would help a lot more people find out about TOGCHAT if you could do me a solid and hit that thumbs up down there below the video, right? The more people that hit the thumbs up, the more YouTube will recommend the show. And of course, while you're down there, feel free to hit that share button. Let your photography friends know that we are streaming live on YouTube right now. You can click that button or you can share the link that I just dropped in the chat window. It's tog.chat/live. Twitter, Facebook, fastest way to get the word out. And by the way, gang, if you're a member of any photography clubs or groups, please let them know all about TOGCHAT. Don't keep it all to yourself. And remember, TOGCHAT is available for download as a podcast every week. We are now in the top 100 of all visual arts podcasts on Apple Podcasts and still climbing the charts. I'll share the link in the chat for you. And of course, it is in the show notes down below. Podcast is a great way to get your weekly fix while you're doing your editing or retouching. And remember, each episode of the podcast includes content that you're not seeing here on YouTube. So don't miss out. The show is available on iTunes, Google, Spotify, Amazon, iHeartRadio, Pandora, and pretty much anywhere you'd like to get your podcast fixed. I post the podcast a few hours after the end of the live show each week. Okay?
Next up is a TOGCHAT exclusive interview.
And that brings me to tonight's feature. I have got an awesome interview for you with a photographer from Boston, Massachusetts. But don't worry, his Boston accent, it's understandable. But believe me, you don't want to miss this interview. Rick Friedman has been a photojournalist, portrait, and travel photographer for 4 decades. He travels the world for numerous publications, corporations, advertising assignments, and film and television productions. I first met Rick at a small photography event in upstate New York, and since then, we always managed to catch up and spend some time together at all the major trade shows around the country, which means I haven't actually seen him in just about a year since we were both at WPPI. Rick was very generous with his time, and we talked for just about an hour. So, as always, I'm going to play the first 20 minutes of the interview for you here on YouTube. And then the full unedited interview will be available for download as part of the podcast later this evening. Make sure you check it out, gang. Rick shares some really great behind-the-scenes info about life as a photojournalist, but even better, he shares some real nuggets about using speed lights in daylight for event photography. You don't want to miss it. And I also want you to be sure to check out Rick's website to see more of the incredible images of people and history that you're going to recognize. The links are in the show note. I'll share them in the chat during the interview. So let's go ahead. Let's get right into it. Rick Friedman, it is my honor to finally have you on TOGCHAT, sir. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much for having me. It's great to be here, or as far apart as we are.
Yeah, indeed, indeed. So, Rick, I ask every guest, and I've already given you a bit of a build-up here, but I ask every guest to just introduce yourself to my audience, give them a sense of who you are and kind of what's important about what you do.
Thanks. It's first of all, it's really great. I'm glad to be here. My background is I am a magazine photographer. Been a photojournalist for probably more years than I want to admit. Started out working for one of the wire services many years ago, and then was lucky enough to shortly after that be taken on by a terrific photo agency, Black Star. Was with them, and through them I got connected with working for Newsweek, which I did for quite a while, and did a lot of work for Time and a whole lot of other magazines. And photojournalism is my passion, but a lot of the magazine work that we did involved a lot of lighting. When you went in and did a portrait, you back then you brought lots of sets of dynalights and lit it up. And through that, really get into doing portraiture. And I have a studio here in downtown Boston, and we do a lot of portraiture here. And we do an assortment of magazine work. And I also I teach a lot of location lighting workshops where people come in, and we'll teach them from how to make cool flash on camera to doing really elaborate multicolored lighting sets. And make things fly and smoke and things look like they're blowing up. And it's just lots of fun. I love the teaching. And then I'm a Tamron Lens ambassador, so which is great company, great lenses. I'm also a Savage Universal ambassador, and then I do a lot of work with Roscoe Lighting. And if you look over my shoulder, you can actually see there's a Rick Friedman Roscoe location lighting kit, which I designed for them. So that's a bit of it. And then the other thing I love doing, because what do photographers do to relax? Well, we go out and take pictures. What else would we do? So I love going out and shooting. I love doing travel photography, long night stuff, long exposures. So I just like doing it all. It's just fun.
Yeah, one of the things that I really appreciate about what you do, in addition to your rather light resume there, okay, you are always shooting, even when you're not busy with work, you're out shooting around Boston and posting images, which I love that. But I want to dig right in.
Please.
So, having started in photojournalism myself, and having an appreciation and also an envy of what you do, you cover events that are frequently covered by dozens of others, if not hundreds of other photographers, and of course television. So, right to the meat of it, how do you, or what do you do to make your work stand out? Because let's face it, you don't get to work for Newsweek and Time and publications like that just by doing run-of-the-mill work. What's your secret?
Not sure it's a secret. I mean, you try to anticipate where things are going to happen. When I first started, the guy who taught me had a saying, F8 and be there. Just, figure out where to be, get there and be in the right place and anticipate it. And, you mentioned about all the other photographers, and you go out today and, you can be competing against 5 or 6 wire photographers, plus the other agency photographers. So, you can be out there, and the goal is to come up with something different. I mean, if there are 5 wire photographers standing next to each other, I probably don't want to stand there. I mean, granted, they probably know more than I do, but, I don't want to make the same picture. So I'm willing to go out and kind of risk it and look for something different. Try to figure out where to be. You don't, succeed all the time, that's for sure. But you try to guess, and then it comes down to what equipment are you carrying? I joke about it, but the older I get, the less stuff I carry. You get out there and you got 12 tons of equipment, you can't move fast. And as we had a couple of times, this summer when the tear gas starts flying, you want to be able to move. So, instead of carrying 3 cameras, this summer I carried 2 cameras and a tear gas mask. So that's a good part of it, is anticipating where it's going to be. And then hopefully have the right camera in your hand. So I work 2 cameras on news stories. That's it.
Just 2. Okay. So that brings up a good question. Given that you need to be mobile, and given that you're looking for something that not everybody else is doing, which certainly means there are times where you're going to have to respond very quickly. What are your kind of go-to lenses? I realize certain events may require different things, but you mentioned the protests, this past summer. What are your go-to lenses for those two bodies?
So I work Nikon 850s for the camera bodies. And if it's going to be a protest, and sometimes you need a really wide lens. You need to kind of get in there. So I'll carry a Tamron 17 to 35 on one, and then either a Tamron 100 to 400 or a 70 to 200. And it almost depends on, is it going to be a day protest, or is it going to be a day protest that goes into night? If it's going to go into night, I'm going to take the 70 to 200 2.8, which ironically is a heavier lens than the 100 to 400. And I don't know if you find this, but, the longer the day, the heavier the gear gets. It seems to gain weight during the day. So, at the end of walking around for 8 hours carrying this stuff, it's a lot heavier.
Even using micro four thirds in a long day, it gains weight. So I'm with you on that one for sure. That being said, as I look through your portfolio, which it's amazing.
Thank you. That's very kind of you. I appreciate it.
Amazing in the sense of not only is it incredible photography, but it is an incredible range of images and history, that you have witnessed. One thing that I find really stands out in your work, and certainly this should stand out in any photojournalist's work, but I really do think that you do superior work in this category. And it is something that I would refer to as the power of the moment. You talked early on about the idea that you frequently have 5 or 6 other photographers or more that are shooting the same thing. So you're looking for something that's a little different. And as I look through your portfolio, I see images of events that I remember from the news, events that I've lived through historically. But I'm seeing an energy in your pictures. Oftentimes it's expressions. Sometimes it's body language. Talk to me about that. I mean, obviously it's there, and obviously you are putting a lot of effort into that. So can you give me a little bit of maybe where that comes from in your workflow and things that you do to kind of give you that edge?
You're looking for the moment, and what is the right place to be? I think back on some of the stuff that I shot during the assorted protests over the summer. And I felt like this past summer, I spent a good part of the summer walking around the city backwards, photographing protests and marches. Some political, some Black Lives Matter. But it's a lot of stuff where you're looking for the photograph. You're anticipating the moment, but you're also looking around the whole frame. No. What else is going on? So yes, I have one person screaming at another person, or somebody flipping somebody the bird, but I'm trying to very quickly, as this is happening, make my eye go around the whole frame. So is there a reflection in something? I have one of two people yelling at each other, in front of the Massachusetts State House. And the political sign is reflected in the car windshield. I mean, I'm leaning over the car and I'm hoping they don't back up because my feet were probably under the tires. And had I not gotten in that tight, I might have missed one of those elements. So yes, a good tight picture of the interaction of the two sides is great, but that little bit extra of the reflection on the car windshield, and you look around the whole scene. I mean, there's another one, and it was actually from the same day, in front of the Massachusetts State House, where the yelling had somewhat died down and all the state troopers are lined up inside the fence at the State House. And there's this one lone woman yelling at the cops through a microphone, like she's actually going to convince them about whatever she's yelling about. I'm pretty sure that's not going to happen. And then on the right side of the frame, you see one of the political signs. So you try to pull all the elements together. It's the depth of the picture. Where does your eye go, when you first look at that frame? When editors look at a picture, I mean, it's almost like you have a millisecond to capture them. And it's the same thing like in a photo contest. I'm sure you've judged contests, where the first round, boy, it's in or out. And that picture has to grab, why, when an editor has a choice of 5 or 6 pictures, and just because you've been assigned doesn't mean they're going to guarantee to use your picture. You know, if one of the wire guys has has a better picture, then that's what they're going to go with. And then sometimes it comes down to the time. So, you know, I mean, one of the photographs, the day that it was announced that Biden had won, that was a day ranging from protests to marches to, it was like, okay, I'm done, I'm tired. Fortunately, my studio is right downtown, so I don't drive to these events. I just walk to them. And I got to walk back to the studio because I have all these images I have to file. If they're in my camera, even if they're really good, if I don't send them, you know, then they're not any good. So I'm thinking, I got to go back and file right now. And I start walking back, and of course, I hear some commotion. So you go over and you see what's going on, and you can see the crowd growing, and this is a celebration. And it's probably by this point, I don't know, 3:30. I've been out of 5-6 hours already. And I got plenty of pictures. I know I have pictures. And then I'm looking at it and watching the crowd making more pictures. And then I realized that, you know, it's only a few minutes till blue hour. And if I just hang around for another few minutes, of course, meaning like another half hour, you know, that ambient light's going to drop in the sky. The street lights are going to come on. I'm going to get that cobalt blue sky with a little bit of cloud in it. And then I'm going to take my speed light and fill it in. And one of the pictures I really like of some people standing on top of some barriers, and you just see somebody waving an American flag against this beautiful sky. And it's, you know, slow shutter speed. So there's movement in the flag. And walking by the first time, before it started to get dark, I wouldn't have gotten that picture. So it's judging the time, what time of day it is till deadline, what your light gonna do. Do I have another couple of minutes? And I'm forever pushing the envelope, you know. And at the end of a long day, I'm trying to walk fast back to the studio.
And I love that. And I love the detail that you just gave me there about working with the slow shutter speed. So let me ask you to dig a little bit deeper. So I'm going to ask you to really work back through your memory for the sake of, of people that see images like this. And, you know, obviously you're working with slow shutter speed, you're working with speed light, which is excellent for that time of day. But was there a point where you decided, you know what, let me go to slow shutter speed and see what I can find? Or was it more a matter of, oh, look at this flag waving, let me maybe grab a frame at a faster shutter speed where I'm at, and then switch to a slower shutter speed to see if I can get something more dynamic? How does that transpire in your mind?
Hey, we'll back up to the beginning of what you were asking me about, you know, the speed light. So I use Nissan speed lights. And this kind of an event. So I'm out there, I'm going out, you know, in the morning. Hadn't planned to be out there at dark, but I was. You get out there in that midday light, and that speed light I'm doing flash fill with in the middle of the day. You know, just to give it, you know, underexpose the picture a little bit so I get my sky to pop, fill it in with the speed light so it's got some character. So the speed light midday in this sort of a thing is very important, okay? At least for the way I like shooting. Then we get into blue hour, and then I'm using it. Now my shutter, as you asked, my shutter speed is dropping. Because when I'm making this picture, I was saying, you start your exposure with the element you can't control. The element I can't control is the light in the sky. That's what's there. So I very quickly start my exposure, grab my camera, use my in-camera meter, get a meter reading off the sky. Okay, that meter reading off the sky is now what my speed light has to fill in. So if it's midday and, you know, if I'm shooting, I quickly get a meter reading, you know, ISO 100, 250th, you know, f8, between 8 and 11, you know, that's when I'm going to set the camera at, and the speed light's going to fill it in. By the point where I got to the flag picture, I was shooting at a 15th of a second. Okay. If I could have shot that picture to 250th, but I would have had no movement, I would have had no sky. So I've slowed it way down. I'm a big fan of using rear curtain sync. I like doing that on these sort of pictures. I tend to just set it on the camera and leave it. And that's sort of my approach. Meter reading off the sky, decide how much depth of field I need. That's not giving me the exposure. And often I will use the speed light on TTL, but not always, but often I do. And that's sort of my process. And this is all, I'm seeing the picture form in front of me. And now it's almost like, imagine I have a camera in my hand, quick meter reading, boom. That's it. It's all done very fast.
And that's awesome. And that brings me to kind of a style choice question. So much of what we see in photojournalism today, because of cameras that are able to work at really high ISOs and still produce a good image, is strictly available light, nothing added, nothing enhanced. There are some people that would say the idea of using fill flash in the daytime is kind of like old school. However, it clearly gives your images a pop. It really makes your subject jump. So at this point in your career, is that very much a style choice for you? Is it more a matter of I've just always liked that look? Or is there also an element that you find that helps editors and publications be able to use your images because of that kind of additional clarity? Because we all know sometimes when our images get reproduced, especially small, it's a battle to really make that image look good. How does that fit in today's world where all we see is high ISO and whatever light is there?
It's interesting that you say that because I'm talking about using speed lights in different situations, on a shoot. Quite often, once we get to the point where we just have street lights, I tend to be using the flash less. I tend to be shooting more available because I think those colors add to the picture. Now, there are times that I'll use that speed light and dial it down. So it just cleans up the color a little bit on the people's faces. And I'll tell you, when I'm using that speed light midday as flash fill, it's always turned down one full stop because I don't want it to look like what we used to call a blap strobe picture. I want it to maintain some of the character, but I want to fill in some of the shadows, but not totally blow them away. So it's sort of this balancing act, of cleaning up the picture a little bit, but not making it look too strobe. So I kind of do this balancing act.
Awesome. Now, I want to be clear for folks, since we're talking so much about speed lights, you're referring to on-camera speed lights, not off-camera with a big modifier, that kind of stuff.
Well, so most of the time I'm on a news event, it's either on camera or it's one arm's length away from the camera. So, I'm holding it at an arm's length. I've got a small transmitter on my camera, and I may be doing it that way. But no, I'm not going, at this point, this kind of lighting, I'm not going in with sets of studio strobes. I do a lot of that. I love playing with strobes, but that's a whole different kind. So if I get assigned to do a portrait of someone, we did a piece not too long ago where the assignment was to go do a portrait of this family for an article for one of the European mags. Well, and we shot it at noontime. It was the only time of day they could shoot it. All right. That I brought out, a big Dynalite with battery operated and put an octabox on it. And, the goal was to not make it look too lit, but not make it look like it was noontime either. So, depending on what the assignment is, the portrait of a professor may be much more lit than a lot of other things I do.
So you mentioned earlier the image from the protest where you were leaning over the back of the car with obviously a wide angle lens.
Yeah, 17.
And I'm sure this may vary by assignment a little bit, but just let's take the more chaotic assignments like protests or events like that. If you could only pick one, you talked about using your wide angles. You also talked about carrying a 100 to 400 or a 70 to 200. If you could only pick one, are you going with wide angle and getting in close, or are you going to choose the telephoto? Which is kind of your and I realize there's always exceptions. There's no one size completely fits all, but do you have kind of
For me, if I had to choose one, and I can choose a zoom.
Yep. Yep. You can choose a zoom.
It's funny. If I can only take one, I'm probably going to take a Tamron 2470. It's going to be, if it's only one lens, that's what it's going to be. I'd like to go wider and I'd like to go longer.
Why that lens?
I like the range.
Okay.
I mean, obviously,
But
I'm not going to
why
get in
the
as
wide
close as I
angle?
can get
What
in with
about
it.
wide angle is it?
Well, it's sharp as can be at 24. I mean, the whole lens, it's sharp all the way through. But 20. I sometimes I want to go wider, but 24 will get me in there. And the 70 end of it is going to give me a very short telephoto, but there's just we all know the cameras and the lenses are so good today. We can get away with stuff that we couldn't get away with 5 or 10 years ago. So that's sort of that 2470 is like my walk around lens, my all around lens. And unless it's really dark, it has a polarizing filter on it all the time. Which, outdoor news stories, middle of the day, that polarizing filter, which, I don't know if most other people would carry one. You carry them for scenics. I mean, I carry it for that. And, in that millisecond where there's the reflection on the car window with the polarizer, I can slightly control it. If it's the wide shot and it's got some sky, a few clouds, it's going to make it pop. What's going to make the whole scene pop and, again, differentiate your work from somebody else's.
Very cool. So just to change directions a little bit here, if I've done my research correctly, your first presidential campaign that you photographed was Jimmy Carter.
Correct.
Is that correct?
That is, yeah, I didn't do huge amounts on it, but yes.
Okay, so
that was the very beginning.
Okay. So going back or thinking back, to the beginning of your access to presidents, what are the differences that you experienced shooting presidents like Carter or like Bush 41 compared to Obama and then even currently Trump? How has it changed? And that is where I'm going to leave you hanging because I really want you to hear the entire interview. So as I mentioned earlier, the podcast goes live around 11 p.m. Eastern Time in the U.S. tonight. And you can find it at www.togchat.com. I just put the link in the chat window, and of course, it's also in the show notes. Rick shares some great advice for photographers who want to be published and work for magazines. So make sure you listen, okay? All right, some photo news this week. Many of you have asked about this, and indeed it was announced. Olympus Corporation has finalized the sale of their imaging division to the Japanese company JIP. The new company will be known as OM Digital Solutions, and for the time being, the Olympus brand name and logo will remain on the cameras. It is yet to be determined what the brand name and logo will be. Also this week, Godox has announced the compact AD100 Pro Pocket Flash Strobe, which features high-speed sync, wireless control, TTL, and a modeling lamp powered by a rechargeable battery. All in, battery included, the tiny strobe weighs just 18.5 ounces. That's 524 grams. It features magnetic modifiers and uses the same battery as the Godox V1 Speedlight, which is rated for about 360 full power flashes. The flash will sell for $299, which means that basically you can overspend for a speedlight that doesn't attach to your camera. Look, I'm a Godox user and I've invested a lot of money into their system, but I got to tell you folks, this is one unit that I honestly think is pretty ridiculous. And last, Sony users are going to have to wait a little longer for their next cameras. Reports are that Sony has 2 E-mount cameras in the pipeline, but a recent factory fire may delay their launch.
It's time for this week's photo quote and featured photographer.
All right, so last week, I got a lot of positive feedback about my new photo quote of the week feature. So here's another one for you. My quote this week: in order to make art, The frustration of not working has to be greater than the frustration of working. That quote comes to us from the original master of the photo montage, photographer and educator, Jerry Uelsman. Now, for me, I love this quote because it represents two different realities. The first, if you are passionate about what you do, you will work harder than most, but never feel like it's work. After all, work is a four-letter word. The second reality is that in order to be successful in life, you can't be lazy. If you're not willing to put in the effort, you will not work as a photographer and you will not succeed. I first learned of Jerry Uelsman via the pages of Popular Photography and Modern Photography magazines in the 1970s. His work in darkroom effects, compositing, and unusual processing techniques far foreshadowed the use of Photoshop to make surrealistic composited images. In fact, I want to show you just a quick peek of his website, which I'm going to share the link to, but also just some of his images. Keep in mind, folks, these composites that you're seeing, these were all done on film, right? So using the word, whoops, that's a pop-up. Using the word surreal, it doesn't really do justice when you consider the amount of trial and error that went into creating these images. I mean, his images are both otherworldly and brilliant because they force you to kind of consider and interact with his subjects. A little bio and history. Mr. Uelsman first picked up a camera at age 14 and eventually started making money photographing models. He went on to earn a BA from the Rochester Institute of Technology, which was and continues to be one of the foremost technical photography schools in the world. He received an MS and an MFA degree from Indiana University, and he cites teachers Minor White and Ralph Hattersley as his influences. And stay tuned, those are two names that you'll be hearing in future TOGCHAT episodes. So I invite you to check out Mr. Uelsman's work. I have a link to his website and portfolio in the show notes. I just shared it with you in the chat as all. And believe me, regardless of your chosen genre of photography, it is impossible not to be captivated by these images. Check them out.
It's time for some problem solving. The TOGCHAT Q&A.
So how can I help you with your photography tonight, gang? What aspect of your photography do you want to improve this year? Now's the time. I do have a couple questions that came in early, so we'll get to those first. But go ahead, type them in. What do you need to work on to improve? Okay, so I'm going to scroll back in the chat here because I know there were a few that were pretty early on. And Darko had kind of a two-part question. So let's go ahead and we'll grab that first and see if we can help out here. And the first one he had has to do with mixing LEDs and flash. Darko, I don't have a video that is specifically about mixing LED and flash, but I do it. I have done it more than once. I would say actually rather routinely at this point. And you will see me do it in some of my videos. So it's something that is certainly an option. There are some pros and cons while doing so. His follow-up question to that was, in a small studio setting, and he's talking small like 10 feet by 17 feet, when he paints the walls, should he go gray or white? That depends. And I know everybody hates when I give an answer like that, but really it has a lot to do with your shooting style. I mean, depending on your shooting style, there's actually an argument for making the walls black or really dark gray. But if it were me, I would be choosing between white and gray. So let me explain what your criteria would be to make that decision. If you go back to my YouTube channel, in fact, let me go ahead and I'll switch over and I'll find you the video and I will share the video with you here. I have a video about my home studio, okay? And in that video, I talk about the fact, and I also show you guys how, number one, the walls are painted white, in fact, semi-gloss white. But also, I talk about the idea that I use the walls and the white ceiling really as kind of part of a modifier. In other words, I will bounce light off them. I will bounce light off the ceiling, off the walls. So I'm using them essentially as white reflectors. Okay. Um, if you don't want to go that route, if you like more dramatic lighting and if you want more shadows in your lighting, then I would recommend either going with a gray or going with a black. The gray would probably be a little bit more versatile because if you have a big enough wall space, you can use that gray as a background. And then keep in mind, my favorite background color is gray because I can aim a light at it, put a colored gel on that light, and I can turn that gray background into any color that I want. So it really depends on how you like to do your lighting, Darko. That's gonna really be the key. But ultimately, I would say your choice is between gray or white, and there's really not a wrong answer as long as you're considering what do I want happening. The thing to definitely be careful of is picking colors. When you're in a small room, you've got to be very aware of the fact that the walls will reflect whatever color they're painted. So if you've got green walls or yellow walls or red walls, you're going to be kicking that color light back onto your subject. That's not a good scenario because that's going to cause you all kind of color balance issues. Okay. Now let's see what we got next here. And from Milton Welch, I'm in San Diego. What is a good professional association to join and why? Milton, I would have to say, first and foremost, PPA, hands down. In fact, I can share a link for you guys here that'll get you $25 off your membership if you join. But let me give you a little bit of background on this now, right? So, PPA is a national organization, Milton. Great organization, incredible learning opportunities. In fact, for all of you, remember, Imaging USA comes up next weekend. It's right around the corner. I'll be presenting a pre-con class next Saturday, and I will be telling you a little bit more about imaging next week and what to expect and all those kinds of things. So that being said, um, I would recommend PPA at the national level for all of the benefits, including the $15,000 worth of equipment insurance that comes with it. But Milton, in your backyard, you also have Professional Photographers of San Diego, which is the regional version of that. In fact, let me just see here really quick if I can find their website for you. And if I can, I will gladly share that. And if not, you're just going to need to go do a Google search. Okay. But in fact, you just missed a couple of weeks back, I did a presentation for them virtually, of course. I wish I was in San Diego, but yes, here's the link for their site. The difference between the regional groups and the national groups, the regional groups tend to obviously, focus more on that area. You're oftentimes dealing with a group of photographers that range truly kind of from advanced amateurs to very, very experienced professionals. And I can tell you for a fact that the San Diego group, that is very much the case. You've got some excellent nationally known photographers in that group. And then you've also got some folks that really are kind of just starting out. They've crossed that line of being really serious about their photography, but they're still really working on learning and developing their business skills. Start there. Those would be your best two spots to check. And certainly if you have more questions along the way, let me know. Okay. All right. So let me scroll back on up here. And there we go. So I got Milton's question. And let's see. Tarko looked up Rick's YouTube page and subscribed. Very good. So cool. You have some Rogue Flash modifiers already. Yeah. I mean, you'll see, Rick, obviously being a photojournalist works with very portable gear when he's doing assignments like that. So the small Rogue modifiers, all that kind of stuff, he works with that quite a bit. Okay. All right, and let's see, scrolling on down here. How are we doing? Oh, we got time, guys. Give me some more questions there. How can I help you guys out? So let's see. From Jessica. I met you both at Unique Photo. Not a fan of fabric backdrops and paper backdrops. What are your thoughts on vinyl material? Something that is wrinkle free, low maintenance, and eco friendly. So, and I see that Rick weighed in. So I want to kind of get his answer there too. I use some painted backdrops from Savage and some printed vinyl backdrops from Click Props, both excellent companies. And obviously, full disclosure, I'm also sponsored by Savage, as is Rick. And I use their backgrounds, their paper backgrounds, and I also use some of their lighting gear as well. So that being said, um, Jessica, yeah, I mean, for me, I like the paper a lot, but well, actually, for any background, let me add this. I like the paper a lot. I also have some hand painted backdrops that are Chinese made from not Click Props, and of course now Kate's Backdrops. That's who it is. And they're great also. But here's the challenge, right? When you when you get into the point where you are going to start purchasing backdrops, realize that you need, and even if you're just doing this for fun, you need to be paying attention to the cost, and you need to be looking at it from the standpoint of what can you make back and earn back from this backdrop? Because when you get that backdrop, you're going to be very excited. It's new, it's cool, it's exciting, and you're going to do a couple pictures with it. And then you're quickly going to start to realize, I've been there, done that. I've used this backdrop in a bunch of stuff. Well, it's really expensive to then just like toss to the side and go buy a new backdrop. I mean, it's just not practical. So your challenge with all backdrops is looking for different ways, creative ways to use it. One of the obvious ones, let's say it's a painted backdrop of some type, would be lighting it with colored gels and essentially changing the colors of it, right? Depending on the pattern of the background, one of the things that you would consider doing would be, instead of hanging it flat, would actually be to hang it so that it kind of drapes and curls and that type of thing, and change it up. And then if you do that, when you kind of create these textures, you can also throw light across it, which creates shadows and depth to the background. So as you're looking at backgrounds and saying, oh, I really like that, or I really like that, I challenge you, before you pull the trigger and buy the backdrop, think ahead a little bit, use your creative thought process with the idea of what kinds of different things could I do with this backdrop so that I can really get my money's worth out of it. I will tell you that a lot of the printed backdrops that are available now from many of these lesser expensive Chinese background companies, they are printed on kind of a stretchable fabric and it does not wrinkle. So the best part is you can fold it up and you open it up and it's good to go. It's also a very thin material. That's not bad, but that just means that if you want the background completely flat and smooth, a little trick is they're very lightweight. So you can hang them just from two light stands and a crossbar, but you're also going to want to take like a piece of, and it could be as light as PVC pipe, plastic PVC, or a metal bar and just clamp it, use some A clamps and clamp it to the bottom. That's going to keep the background completely smooth. So it's not that they'll wrinkle, but they're so lightweight, you kind of have to stretch them to make sure that they stay completely flat if that's what you want. So, yeah, I mean, that's definitely an option. And then I'm not quite sure why you're not a fan of the fabric backdrops. So if you want to give me some more info, I can maybe try and solve some problems there. But I will tell you that if you're looking at vinyl, one last thing on backdrops. And by the way, Jessica, I have a few videos about backdrops on my YouTube channel, so you should check it out. But if you're looking at vinyl, understand that vinyl backdrops are crazy heavy. So they're outstanding in the fact that they are durable. You can wipe them down, clean them off. All that's great, but they're heavy. So don't go to Amazon.com and buy a cheap background stand setup that's like, two stands and a crossbar, because I can pretty much guarantee you that cheap setup is not going to hold your vinyl backdrop. you're going to mount that vinyl backdrop and you're going to see the stand start to, basically toggle their way down or, just be crooked. It's not going to work very well. So if you're going to do the vinyl, if you can, you're going to be better off with a permanent spot to mount them, where you're either going to mount them on the wall or the ceiling. And if you can't do the permanent mounting, then you need a really heavy duty set of light stands and crossbar. Otherwise, you will be miserable with your vinyl background, especially if you're going to go with a big vinyl background, like a 9-foot wide. They are crazy heavy. So you've been forewarned. Jessica, I hope that helps. Okay. All right. And Robert Julian, on many of Rick's portraits, a hair light is being used. What light is used? Where is the light placed? And in general, how do you get the light so accurately focused on the model's hair? See, did Rick answer on that one? He didn't. So, you know what? Off the top of my head, let me go back to portraits here because I'm not sure. I'm going to bring Rick's website up. Rick Friedman, wrong button. There we go. Okay. So, and by the way, gang, you talk about like amazing iconic images. This image of Zuckerberg is like, it's a shot that Rick is well known for because it's kind of like one of the first shots of Zuckerberg at the very beginning of Facebook. So it's a shot that you frequently see, um, you see being published and republished over and over again. So shots like this one, and I apologize, Robert, because I don't know exactly which image you're speaking to, but shots like this one, obviously, is stage lighting, so that's not lighting that Rick set up. That's basically the existing light. I'm just looking to see if I can find a shot where he's actually set light up that's got a hair light on it. And I'm not going to lie to you, I'm not seeing any particular shots here with hair lights. So, um, let's just check the professors out and see what's in here. Yeah, Robert, can you give me a specific shot that you're looking at? And I will gladly, I'll break it down for you. If Rick's not here and able to answer it, it's not a problem because you can look at the shot and figure out where the light is. Yeah, if you give me a little bit more specifics, I will definitely try and help you out there. Okay. All right. From Mitch. Oh God, you're gonna get me in trouble with this question, Mitch, aren't you? Okay. Have you ever attempted a remote shoot? They've become popular due to lockdowns, and a couple of models have asked me about them, but I don't think it would be possible to build any sort of rapport. Look, Mitch, I'm not gonna lie to you. It's like anything else. In my opinion, there are a few people that have done some very creative things with these remote Zoom shoots. Most of the remote Zoom shoots that you see getting posted, like on Facebook and Instagram, though, are just a bunch of middle-aged perverts that figured out they can still get a girl half naked or naked on the other end of a camera and take a bunch of pictures. So I know I'm gonna get slapped for that somewhere, but I'm sorry, gang. I'm just calling it like it is, right? I think it's absolutely ridiculous. Yes, would it be possible to maybe do something kind of cool and creative here or there? Sure. Is it a trend, Mitch? Yep, it is, because people are desperate, and like I get that, and I respect that. Believe me, I'm star crazy too. But yeah, I think it's honestly kind of the most ridiculous thing going. And let's put it this way: at the end of the day, one thing's for sure: you're not going to be producing any images that are portfolio worthy. And also, you're not going to be producing any images that are portfolio worthy of your model and are going to potentially get her work or get her hired. So it's more headache than it's worth. So pandemic sucks. Being locked down sucks. But it's worth it because it will end and we'll get to go back and do the things that we like to do. In the meantime, we gotta suck it up a little bit. So that would be my advice, honestly. All right, from Dwayne. Joe Edelman, thank you for all the great work. My pleasure, Dwayne. Thank you. Do you have an opinion on shooting weddings and events manually? Autofocus is amazing, but as a Leica shooter, I love the look of older M lenses. Okay. So opinions. There's an old phrase about opinions. I will not quote it here. So I'm not really sure, and I'm not trying to be a jerk here, Dwayne, but I'm going to be really honest with you. I'm not really sure why you would even ask a question like that. Let me explain, right? At the end of the day, if you're shooting weddings, if you have shot weddings using your Leica and using M lenses on your Leica, and if your images are turning out to your satisfaction and to your client's satisfaction, then what does my opinion matter? Right? I mean, it ultimately doesn't. Okay. Never ask another photographer, I don't care who the photographer is, to essentially justify what's working for you and tell you, oh, yeah, it's right. At the end of the day, if your image is working, it's working, right? For me, now let me answer the question in a different way, Dwayne. I am unfortunately at an age where if I had to do manual focus, I would miss half my shots because my eyes are not what they used to be. My glasses are trifocals. I have to work a lot harder for manual focus. I can still manual focus, but it's a slow process. It's a much more deliberate process. And fortunately, it's a little bit easier with the mirrorless cameras because of focus peaking and things like that, but it's still a challenge. So I would not choose to do manual focus in a million years at this point in my career. Obviously, I'm old enough. I learned on manual focus. There was no such thing as autofocus in that. So it really comes down to, if it works for you, knock yourself out. Um, like, I mean, honestly, I'm sorry, you're asking me like about my opinion on manual or autofocus. I'm like, why in the world would you use a Leica? But hey, if you can afford a Leica, cool, knock yourself out and go for it. So, um, but that's really what it comes down to. If you're getting the results that you want and you're getting them consistently, because let's face it, for a wedding happens once. You can't miss it. You can't screw it up. You got to get it right. So as long as you're accomplishing that, good for you. You're good to go. Okay. Jessica, follow up on the fabric thing. Fabric involves steamer, and to me, that's high maintenance. All right, Jessica, that's fair. But you know what? You just tipped your hand that you have not watched all of the appropriate Joe Edelman videos, okay? So let me switch back over. I'm going to go to the YouTube channel here. On the little magnifying glass, when you get to the channel, type in background, and you need to watch. So first of all, let me grab this link. I mentioned this one before about my favorite background color being gray. So if you have any questions on that. But Jessica, the video that you want to watch, this one right here, DIY backgrounds, and also actually tells you how to make a portable background stand. This will tell you all about the right material to get that doesn't wrinkle. I have this particular type of background. I put the link in the chat window there for you. I have this particular type of background. It's like a crushed velour material. I have it in like every color. I fold them nicely, but I can walk downstairs in my studio, pick any one of them, open it up, hang it up. It's perfectly smooth. No wrinkles whatsoever. So it's all about getting the right material. So yeah, check that out. And I think that might also help you because the great part about that stuff is you go to like a Joann's Fabrics and it goes on sale a couple times a year. So if you subscribe to their email newsletter and you allow them to spam you for a year, you'll be notified every time they have a fabric sale on and every time they have a sale on the crushed velvet. And then you can go in and you can get it really, really cheap. And it works really, really well. Okay. Jessica, is this like that fleece looking material? No. Jessica, watch the video. Watch the video. Okay. I'm not going to do all the work here. Watch the video. All right. So next question here. Let's see. Dwayne shot them with a Sony. Oh, okay. So he's not using a Leica camera. He's using Leica lenses on a Sony. Hey, if you're into that, Dwayne, again, kind of same thing. Cool. As long as it works, man. That's that. At the end of the day, that's the piece. You wouldn't catch me in a million years using manual lenses on today's, automatic cameras and that kind of stuff. I'm just not into that. I'm not disrespecting anybody. I know some people really love playing with those old lenses on the newer camera. Cool. Right. I mean, iconic photographers like David Burnett are known for, playing around with all kinds of crazy lenses on different cameras and do incredible work. And that's great. I'm not into photography for the toys. I mean, we all like toys, don't get me wrong. But yeah, I'm into it for the access. It's the access to my subjects and the access to people. For me, that's That's what it's all about. Okay. All right. So let's see here. Scrolling back on up um and Robert told me here. So basically, shooting portraits, doing remotely. Yeah, Robert. I mean, I got to be honest with you. Even to do a portrait remotely. So this is the follow up to the question about kind of doing the remote shoots via like Zoom or whatever. The thing you got to understand about that, gang, is number one, I would hope you're getting paid, right? So so let's break this down. If you really want to offer, Eric, thank you so much for the super chat, man. I really really appreciate it. So since I was so tough on these Zoom photo shoots, and since Robert's asking literally for professional purpose, it's the idea that somebody needs a portrait done. So all good photography is a result of problem solving, right? So now let's think about the processes involved here. So process one, we're going to do the Zoom shoot. Okay. So that means not only Robert mentioned himself, you're not able to easily make a connection with your subjects, but there's a bigger problem. You're remote and you're having to try and direct your subject to find good lighting, find a good background. They are going to be using a camera on an iDevice where you frequently, are going to get distortion depending on how much you fill the frame, etc. And let's face it, your subjects don't know anything about lighting or background, so you've got a lot of work to do there. And then, how many people actually have proper holders that can be put on a light stand or a tripod for a phone? So the challenge is then they're trying to balance the phone somewhere and they're trying to get it set up. And then it's also got to be close enough to them. So it's not like they can put it on a dresser across the room and back up. You need it to be close to do a portrait so that you get a big enough image on your device to be able to photograph. So think about these headaches. And then you're going to charge somebody for that. You're going to take their money. Why not flip the script, gang? If somebody wants to hire you to do one of these remote portraits because they're desperate, look, I get it. Things happen. Maybe they just lost their job. They need to update their profile picture. Maybe they are an actor and they need to do a character type headshot and they need it now. Doesn't matter what's going on in the pandemic. They need it. They all have smartphones. So why not connect via a Zoom call? And why not basically charge them to consult? In other words, you are going to help them make a great image. You are going to help them, get them to give you a tour around their house or their apartment to find the perfect background with the perfect light. You're going to help them get the phone set up properly. And basically, like, you could do it, think about it, you could do it with FaceTime. So they've got you connected via FaceTime. You're doing all the directing to get everything completely set up the way it needs to be. And then they're going to disconnect and they're going to take their pictures. The picture's going to be properly cropped, properly exposed, because you've helped them adjust all of that in advance. You've helped them get a good background, all those things. If you're going to sit there and photograph the screen that the image is coming across, there's a quality loss. They will actually get a better quality image off their own phone. So why not charge for your knowledge of lighting, your knowledge of composition, your knowledge of posing, and for your time to consult them and assist them in getting the image they need? That's how I would approach it. If I was asked, fortunately, I haven't been asked because I'm not sure I would actually agree to do it anyway. But if that's what it came down to and I had to help someone, I would be consulting them on how to do it, not trying to take a picture of a computer screen while somebody's using a phone or a tablet on the other end. I don't think that is really a practical way to do it. Okay. All right. So let's just see here. I think there was one other question that I saw, and there is from Adam. So let's get this in. This is good timing. I may actually only be a minute or two late tonight. I'm currently still learning how to use Flash slowly for my hobbyist work. Okay. Is there any real reason at my level to change from 3 Yang with no flashes to Godox? I already have a Flash controller. Adam, my honest answer is, given the fact that you asked that question, the answer is no, there is no reason for you to change. If your Yangwano flashes are meeting your needs, why would you change? right? I mean, that's really what it comes down to, folks. Certainly, one reason for changing is just because it's cooler and everybody else has Godox. So if you want to fit in, do the peer pressure thing, yeah, go with Godox. I mean, if you're really going to do the peer pressure thing, ante up the bucks and buy some pro photos while you're at it, right? But now, if your Yangwanos are doing the job, stick with it. Certainly down the road, if you find yourself doing a lot more portraiture, if you find yourself, you know, maybe wanting to work outside, do some overpower the sun, all that kind of stuff, then you may definitely reach a point where your Yangwanos are not really giving you the output and all the features that you need. But if they're working for you and they're getting the job done, I would say that you're good to go. Okay. That being said, and oh, there we go. Rick weighed in on those hairlights here for Robert. He often uses a Nissan Speedlight with a road grid, too narrow the beam of the light, and a quarter CTO, or excuse me, a half CTO filter. Sometimes lights behind the model's head, sometimes it's above. So there you go, Robert. Hopefully that helps out. Basically, the half CTO, it's adding a little bit of warmth to that light, so it's not as cold. Also, basically that warmth is an orange color, which is very flattering. Yeah, I mean that will get the job done. Rick also is answering that he does mix strobes and LEDs. And at the end of the day, gang, the best way to approach this concept of, well, mixing things or doing this is realizing that light is light. All these different lights that we have, whether it's a light wand like the Savage light wands, whether it's like a specular light that you see there, or whether it's a GVM LED or a Godox strobe or a Nissan Speedlight, they are all tools, and each tool can be used to solve different problems and to create different kinds of light. Unfortunately, there's no one light that's like one size fits all, does everything. Even in the interview, you heard Rick talk about, and he'll mention it again further on in the interview when you download it for the podcast, talk about using more powerful dynalights to work outside, needing to overpower the sun at midday. And those are the battery pack type strobes that are going to be, attached to a battery pack while you're shooting. So really, unfortunately, there's no one light that will do it. So you kind of have to look at the idea of each light creates certain kinds of light and has certain capabilities. So then it's really up to you as the photographer to be creative in terms of how can you do it. In Rick's case, he does a lot of traveling for his work. So working primarily with speedlights simply makes sense. In fact, in later on in the interview, when you download the podcast, Rick talks about a speedlight that you guys have heard me talk about before. It is indeed my all-time favorite speedlight ever, and that's the Vivitar 283. And back in the 70s and 80s, that's what photographers were using, and those flashes were to die for. And like Rick, I still have 4 or 5 of them floating around. They still work. They are awesome. And every intern that comes in the door to work with me, those are the first lights that they get to play with. I don't let them anywhere near my lights. If they don't have a lot of lighting experience, they're going to get their lighting experience using Vivitar 283s. That's where they start. And it's not that they're better than today's flashes, not at all. It's that they're simple, basic, easy to use, and it really allows you to focus on light instead of features. No menus, none of that crap. They're about as easy as it gets. So, all right, gang, as always, you guys were awesome. Awesome questions. Rick, thank you for hanging out with us tonight. And believe me, gang, like I told you, you do not want to miss the rest of that interview. So that's going to wrap things up for this week. And it's New Year's. No resolutions. Skip that resolution crap, right? Skip the I want to do list and just get to it, gang, right? Success doesn't happen without results. So thanks for tuning in for a great night of chatting about all things photography. Don't forget to download that podcast to hear the rest of my interview with Rick Friedman. I hope to see you guys again next Wednesday. But in the meanwhile, stay safe, stay healthy, and whatever you do, please remember these words. Thanks for watching this episode of TOGCHAT. Don't forget to download this week's podcast for even more TOG knowledge. The link is in the show notes. Now go and pick up that camera and shoot something, because your best shot, it's your next shot. Adios.